This is the OMG Book Show with William O'Day, episode number 21.
Welcome to the OMG Book Show, where it's all about taking you into the brains of fantastic authors. No scalpels required. It's more than an interview, it's an experience. And now, your host, William O'Day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show today. Today is a very special day. And, or maybe this is whichever day that you're listening to this to is still a special day because, you know what? Why not? It could be a special day. Could be for you. Could be for me. Could be for anyone out there. So let's just go with every day potentially could be a special day. And today is a very special day because we have an interview with Jason Fry, the author of the Last Jedi novelization that has just been released if you're listening to this episode when it comes out. Now, this was an interview that I was super excited to have with Jason because for me personally, it touches my heart. It's about Star Wars. And I know that may sound kind of silly and cheesy or whatever to think that a media property out there could affect someone on an emotional level. Or maybe it doesn't sound crazy. I don't know. But the truth is that it has, and they do at times. And for me, growing up and seeing Star Wars back when the first one came out, oh, so long ago, 1978, I think now, it was a long time ago. And as a young boy, seeing this amazing epic adventure unfold on the screen, it really did, I don't know if it like changed my life or whatever, but that almost sounds like hyperbole, but it's kind of true because it did set in motion a love, obviously, for that particular property and universe, but also in just reading and thinking about like science fiction and space and this idea that there are really big possibilities out there in life. I mean, I think I probably happened to see it at one of the most perfect ages to see a film like that because I was young enough to not really understand the world, but old enough to start realizing that there was a big world out there to be understood. All that said is, I think basically just means that this Star Wars universe had a really big effect on me, starting from a young age and continuing on to this day. I mean, I think it really did, it's fair to say, have a major effect on the career that I've chosen, over time. Like my last career for 15 years was doing digital effects in Hollywood for these big blockbuster summer movies, a lot like the Star Wars movies. Unfortunately, to my everlasting sadness, I was not able to work on one of the Star Wars movies. It was a big goal of mine while in the industry, but I worked on a lot of other cool films. But certainly just the idea that I wanted to be in cinema and help put these huge stories full of like cinematic scope up on the screen came from Star Wars, came from, when I was 8 years old or 7 or 6 or whenever it was. And even now, I'm in career 2.0 right now, trying to make this thing work. But it's a love of storytelling. In fact, one of the reasons I left my previous career was because I got tired of telling other people's stories, helping them tell their stories. I wanted to tell my own. And I think the seed for having that desire so deeply, was in a large part, probably not completely, of course, but in a large part due to Star Wars and the effect that it had on me, when I was a young kid and growing up with that pretty much surrounding me. I like in my bed, the bed sheets, the sheets on the curtain, the action toys all around the house, So clearly I could ramble all day long about Star Wars. I love it. It's a topic that just for me never gets old, which is one of the reasons it was a huge pleasure to get to talk to Jason today, because as I have come to find out, and you'll find out in the interview, I think, is that I thought I was a Star Wars nerd. I mean, I am, there's no doubt about it, but this guy is a Star Wars Jedi nerd. He is on like a whole nother level. And we go into some of the things that are hilarious and definitely prove that point. Like this, one of the things is he created this journal when he was a kid and reading Star Wars comic books. And this journal is like the most incredibly detailed journal known to man. I mean, it's like a one kid Wikipedia article. It's like a whole domain of Wikipedia covering the details of the comic books when he was a kid. It's truly incredible. So you'll hear more about that. It's really funny. as a story about just kind of where he's coming from and how he fell in love with Star Wars as well. Oh, yes. And before we get started, you probably heard that wonderful music which started the episode. That was Star Wars being played by my daughter Soji on her cello. And I told her when she came home, I was excited. I had the idea. I was like, oh, sweet. You can totally play Star Wars on the podcast for me. It'll be totally great. And then I was thinking, you know what? This is like she's working. She's earning money. And so I offered to pay her $3. And I thought that was like, she's going to have to work at it. I even printed out the sheet music for her. And I was like, it'll take a while and she'll have to practice and it'll be worth, that $3. And so I showed it to her and she was like, do, 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 kind of hummed it, then went in her cello and banged it out in like 2 minutes. And I was like, where's my $3? And of course I wanted a discount at that point. I didn't know how easy it was going to be for her. But I had to pay the $3 because, I said that's what I was going to do. We shook on it and a deal's a deal. So because I had to pay $3 and not maybe the $1 that I probably would have offered in the first place had I known how fast she was going to pick it up, I want to get my money's worth, ladies and gentlemen. So, and in order to do that, in order to get some of that money's worth of that $3, I know it's only $3, but hey, Jason was kind enough during this interview to read the first line of his book. And it is a real, like mind bender sort of first line for anybody that is a big fan of the series and knows kind of the characters and settings where some of the things happen. So without further ado, I'm going to play for you Soji playing the cello, Star Wars music again. And at some point in this music, it just lasts 15, 20 seconds. Jason is going to chime in with his reading of the first line. It's very cool.
Luke Skywalker stood in the cooling sands of Tatooine, his wife by his side.
All right. Thank you so much to Soji and Jason for performing for us today. That was very cool. And without further preamble, let's jump in to the interview with Jason. So, surgical gloves on, metaphorical scalpel in hand. Let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show today. I am super duper, and I think you could probably just take that duper and cube it about 10 times, excited to bring to you on the show today Jason Fry. He is the author of the newly released Last Jedi novelization. Jason, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It is, like I said, and maybe somebody out there will do the math on that super duper because it goes a long ways. I am really excited to have you on the show. I have been a huge Star Wars fan, since they first came out long ago, and obviously being the writer of this new novelization, and then just kind of looking into your background, it clearly comes across that I think I found not my match, but my superior. You are a huge fan. Yeah. When did this begin for you?
I was just turned 8 years old in May 1977 when A New Hope came out, which of course was then just Star Wars. And I remember it was funny. It was one of those things that suddenly everybody was talking about this movie, and not just kids I knew, but people's parents, people's neighbors. It was one of those weird things where suddenly this phenomenon had arrived. So I went to the movies like everybody else, and there's this packed house in Lake Grove, New York, and I had no idea what to expect. And Princess Leia's ship came over the screen, and then the prow of Darth Vader's ship, and then Darth Vader's ship kept coming and coming and coming. And by the time I saw the engines of Darth Vader's Star Destroyer, on some level, I knew my life was different.
Right. It was that quick, and I totally agree.
Oh, goodness, yeah. Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I'd been a kid who'd always loved telling stories. I used to, fill those square kind of blue book things on college campuses because my folks both worked for the university in our town. And I used to fill those with stories of my own making and, write fill like 10, 12 of them, writing some story and then kind of run out of gas. And, but I don't know, it was weird. I just never imagined there were stories like that. like Star Wars. I mean, it was so much fun. It was super exciting. It had all this cool stuff in it. But, at the same time, I knew there were these like depths to it, that it was talking about really big themes, good and evil and family legacies and all this stuff. I mean, I was 8. I didn't, grasp that exactly like that, but I knew it was in there somehow. And so it just kind of exploded my horizons for stories I wanted to tell. And, 40 years later, that's still very much true. Difference is that I'm actually lucky enough to get to write some of those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you first saw it that first time, was there anything in it, being a rather young and sensitive 8-year-old, was there anything in it that scared the pants off of you, or did you take it all, aside from the wonder and kind of this new horizon, did you take it in stride?
Oh, no, I was just absolutely wide-eyed and, just drinking it all in. And then, pretty quickly, just everything was Star Wars. I had to have, all the Kenner figures and, I discovered, oh my God, there's a Marvel comic book series. I got to have all those. And then there was, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, this book, and then Han Solo books. And, and then of course we had to wait 3 years for the next movie, which seems just absolutely unbelievable right now. But, no, it was all consuming. And I never stopped being a fan. Ever in my life, even when it went away for a few years after Return of the Jedi, I was waiting for it to come back. And then it's so funny to think about all this because it was, of course, before the internet, and we didn't have, like this calendar of releases that we could all check, to say nothing of, Twitter and message boards and places we could get all worked up about everything.
Right. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was a newspaper intern in Fresno, California. I was at the Walden Books in the mall, which I would go to probably every week just to see what was new. And there was a new Star Wars novel all of a sudden. It was, Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. There's a Star Wars book, and, snatched it off the pile and ran to pay for it as quickly as possible. And that was just such an amazing surprise that Star Wars was back. And then, well, the rest. Then there was the Dark Empire comic, and now we're in this absolutely amazing age of a movie every year, and TV shows and video games and wonderful comics and novels. And, it's the greatest time to be a Star Wars fan I could imagine. And, I pinch myself about that. And then on top of that, I actually get to contribute to some of these stories. It's just, I often think, like, what would my 8-year-old self have thought of that? And, you just would not have believed any of it.
Totally. Yeah. You'd be like, no, come on.
Yeah, I know. Like, yeah, I mean, even that first part, like, oh, all this Star Wars stuff, he'd be like, oh my God, what a wonderful, amazing future. Like, how can I get there? And, then you'd told him, oh, and you'd actually be lucky enough to get to write some of those. I mean, no, there are no words.
Right.
He just would have fainted dead away.
Well, and you're talking about that, the absolute devotion to it and the level of collecting and things like that. And I happened to see, I think it was on your Tumblr feed, maybe, a most hilarious YouTube video where you're digging up an old kind of little black and white binder of notes that you had taken on the comic books that came out way back when. And just for folks out there, like, I think I'm a Star Wars nerd. No, I'm like the guy who knows nothing about it when compared to this. Let me just name off some of the things that this was your, I think, 8 to 10-year-old self just taking notes on the comic books as you got them. You noted the character symbols used on different covers, the page lengths and prices of different books, the character appearance index in each book, and the character arc index, the rankings from best to worst. I mean, it's crazy. It's like a one-kid Wikipedia, before that was even remotely a thing.
Yeah, it really was. It was like, Wikipedia and pen and paper with lots of crossouts. I was just all into it. And, part of it was just my geeky love of cataloging and understanding and all that, which has never left me. And, I think part of it was also kind of a kid's attempt to grapple with stories and, what made them work and what did I like and what didn't I like. But, that was fun to find that again and share it with people. Hopefully they get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I think they will. And I'm going to include a link into the show notes just because it's so funny. And one little moment, one little beat that had me giggling was when you're kind of you're just glancing through it, kind of, taking note of what you did then. And then you found the list of the worst issue ever. And I think you created a note. It said something. I think I wrote it down. Oh yeah. Still utterly mindless writing. So you were an 8-year-old with a perspective. You weren't just taking it all as it came.
Yeah, I had my opinions. I still do. I've learned to be a little more diplomatic about them, as well as, how hard it is to write a story. And sometimes things don't go quite the way you hoped. But, believe me. Yeah, I had definite opinions about those Marvels. Yeah, that's the amazing thing, though. I mean, it gets back to what I said earlier. There was so little comparatively. I mean, there was a Marvel comic every month, which I would devour and then read 3 or 4 times. And, there were occasional novels and waiting 3 weeks for a movie. There was, the funny thing is there were the newspaper comics too, but, my folks read the New York Times, which, of course didn't have comics. And, so I would read those. I would get to see those like every 3 weeks or so when I was at a friend's house who had Newsday. And, that was sort of hopeless. You could never tell what was going on. But it never occurred to me to ask my folks, if we could subscribe to Newsday so I could read the Star Wars comics. I'm sure they would have let me. And, it wasn't until the late 90s when Dark Horse finally reprinted all those that I actually got to read them all and, remember like the handful of panels I'd seen back when I was a kid.
Wow. That's very cool. So it sounds like the idea of writing, and it seems like that's kind of been in your mindset from a very young age. At what point did it go from being like an interesting pastime, a passionate pastime, to something that resembled a career, like getting paid and doing gigs? I came up through journalism. That was kind of the best way I could figure out to get to write for a living. I was the sports editor on my high school paper, dabbled with a little bit in college, did internships. Actually, when I got out of college, I wrote a literary novel, took like a year on my parents very generously funded it. And, it was pretty good, but didn't get published. And that was when I kind of figured out like, oh, this is going to be a little harder than, write first novel, send it off, be rich and famous. You're the first person to run into that hurdle, but Yeah,
really. I don't know what I did wrong. But so I went into journalism and actually worked for more than a decade for the Wall Street Journal, for its online arm, doing everything from copy editing and writing columns and being a section editor, a blogs guru, you name it. A lot of my good habits as a writer, to the extent that I have them, come from that. I mean, when you're a web journalist and something has to be up right now, there's no writer's block.
Right.
When you're dealing with columns, you understand that you're going to get edited, and you learn kind of to choose which hills you want to die on. A lot of that was really helpful to me, both for developing a work ethic and learning to be part of a team, et cetera. So I did that for a while, but I had always wanted to write, and I always kept loving Star Wars. And so on the side, I kept finding new outlets, for writing. My friend Greg Prince and I started a daily Mets blog, which was, as if I didn't have enough writing to do every day as it is. And, we've still kept that up. We're on like our 14th season now. We still do that every day. And then somewhere along the line, I got a gig working for the Star Wars Insider, the official magazine overseen by Lucasfilm. And I was the books columnist there for a while, and just, used that to just write anything Star Wars that I could. And I wrote stuff for role-playing games, for magazines, and eventually got a chance to do books.
The first one was the Clone Wars visual guide, which came out for the first season of the movie of the Clone Wars. And, from there, went on to do reference books and write kids' books, wrote my own kids' series, and, just anything I could possibly do. I mean, it's a straight line back to my 8-year-old self. Just, you gave me a pen and a piece of paper and an idea in my head, I was happy, and that's all I needed.
That is so cool. And I think did I read somewhere, I think you have a son of your own. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. He's 15.
And has he inherited that passion, or is he like, dad likes it, it's not cool?
Neither, kind of. He's a very good writer. And it's interesting, when he was a terrific kind of sounding board, as a reader, when he was younger, particularly when he was in the kind of sweet spot for books I was writing. Though he once got really mad at me. I was working on the Weapon of a Jedi, my 2015 book about Luke that was part of the Journey to the Force Awakens series. And he was used to kind of being my reader and telling me what worked and what didn't. He got very mad at me when he couldn't read Weapon of a Jedi. And I was like, yeah, no, the NDA kind of starts at home, kid. Sorry.
Yeah, he's like, you're outside the circle now. Come on, Dad.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, no, I'm sorry, you can't read this one. That's just the way it goes from now on. But yeah, no, he's a really good writer, but he's also just a dazzlingly good mathematician, which is a skill I never had. And I've told him, if you want to be a writer, I'll give you guidance on that. But honestly, like, yeah, you stick to math. Like you get better paid and steadier work. So stay with that.
Yeah, that's true. And there are so, at least relatively speaking, it feels like so few people that both love and have a high aptitude for mathematics that, man, if that's your field, you should be able to crush it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I love what I do, and I wouldn't do anything else. I'm not really qualified to do anything else, honestly. But yeah, it can be an uncertain way to make a living. So I'm like, yeah, go be a quant kid, go be a scientist. But if he wants to write, I'll help him through it the best I can.
Right. As long as as long as you don't get pushed out by some NDA he's working under, it'll be fine,
Exactly.
Well, it's good to get the background, just kind of to see where you're coming from and what brought you to where you are today. And of course, you obviously, one of the big reasons we're having on the show is you just a couple of days ago had the huge release of the novelization for The Last Jedi. That, I'm sure, what did that feel like? I mean, I know, but let's hear it in your words.
I mean, it was an amazing honor. It was a really, really interesting project. We had, a chance to talk with Rian Johnson, the director, and also the writer. And that was amazing, and just really good access throughout, and a lot of help from my editors at Del Rey and Lucasfilm and the Lucasfilm Story Group. So all of that was a blast. And of course, I mean, it goes back to my 8-year-old self. Like, I mean, for the Star Wars obsessed kid I was and still am, like the chance to actually get to do that. I mean, I still pinch myself every day thinking about it. But yeah, I was also, I was of course terrified about screwing something up, like letting something slip or, otherwise messing up. So it's great to have the book out in the world, so. So that danger is past, and also just so people can finally read it.
Right.
I mean, that's awesome to have. And there's the reaction to it has been really quite something. I mean, it's been a little overwhelming, honestly.
That's really awesome. I can't wait to, I've got it on the Kindle. It's, I've got to finish a book I'm reading now, and it's next up. I'm super excited.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's been a lot, but it's been a blast, and people seem to like it, most of them, which is, makes me happy, and lots of good questions and lots of enthusiasm about it, and and more importantly for Star Wars in general, which is great.
Right. And then I think you kind of implied it there for a second, but I wanted to touch on it. Being like the huge fan that you are yourself, and then taking on so what I think would feel like such a big responsibility. Did you feel that kind of weight on your shoulders as you were writing it, or not really?
You do, but you always do. but I mean, I didn't let that faze me. It was, I would think of it as kind of good pressure. You are telling, or in this case, really interpreting the stories of Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa, who are characters I've known, most of my entire life and looked up to and loved, as well as new characters that new fans really love and that I love too. Rey, Kylo, Finn, Rose, Poe, etc. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly pressure there. You don't want to, you know how much those characters mean to people, and you certainly don't want to mess that up. But to me, that's good pressure. I mean, I have the responsibility I would feel for myself as a reader, knowing how much those characters mean to me.
Right.
And I know what I'm doing most of the time, and when I don't, there's a great team from Del Rey to Lucasfilm there to help get you back on course and help you tell the story the way it wants to be told. So you're working with a net, which is great.
Right.
But so pressure, sure, but pressure I was happy to have and happy to engage with.
Right on. And I read somewhere, I think maybe in one of your interviews you had mentioned, and not potential, but spoiler alert out here to everyone. If you haven't seen the movie or read the book, then just turn off for about 60 seconds here. But one of the things that really struck me and actually even kind of made my eyes dampen, and maybe a single tear even hit my cheek. You talked about writing Luke's death scene and kind of how touching that was for you. And it, just from the outsider's perspective and knowing the lore of the movies and culture, it just brings me back to thinking of Luke on Tatooine and watching the binary sunset and kind of wondering like what his life will unfold to be, and then you're writing this other side of it, the end being the full circle. Like, I mean, amazing. How did that affect you?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, no, I thought about that all the time. And it was funny when I met with Ryan out at Skywalker Ranch. I told him, I was like, I've written and rewritten that scene over and over in my head so many times already. So it's interesting. One thing I do is I don't jump around when I'm writing. I have to write chronologically because it really helps me kind of build themes and motifs and connections to go that way. Right. But of course, I knew that scene. I knew where that scene was in the overall blueprint, and I knew where I was in relation to it. And the closer it got, the more I was thinking about it. But actually, the day I finally got to it and sat down to write it, it came really easily, which, again, isn't because I'm such a genius. It's just because, staring at the ceiling when I couldn't sleep or wandering around the house. I mean, I had written and rewritten that scene so many times that I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I actually did get there.
Right. Yeah. And I've described it in writing to folks who don't, do the craft of writing as it kind of feels like, if you're solving a Rubik's Cube in your head, over time, and then, you finally, the Rubik's Cube is in your hands and then your fingers just kind of go, blah, 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 and all the, each plane of color is solid. And you're like, there it is, solved.
Yeah, exactly. No, I love that description. And I'd be curious what you think about this. But I mean, one thing that's so interesting about writing is, I mean, there's the time at the keyboard actually producing stuff. And then there's the time when you're writing on some other level, whether you're wandering around the neighborhood or, I mean, God, I used to love mowing the lawn of all things because I would work through all sorts of writing problems without even know I was doing it while mowing the lawn. So, yeah, I mean, like there's a whole level like that where you are writing, even though you're not actually at the keyboard. The difficulty I find is it's fairly easy to be wandering around doing nothing and like defensively say, oh, I'm writing, I'm working on something subconsciously. Right. And in fact, no, you're just not doing your job. So I don't know. I gotta, we all as writers, I think, can trick ourselves into thinking one is the other.
Right. There's a slippery slope of accountability there.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Well, do you have, I mean, it sounds like from your history, working at professional periodicals, things of that nature, with deadlines and such, do you have for yourself a daily sort of ritual or routine worked out around writing?
Yeah, it still needs some work. I'm a total night owl, so I'll usually get up about mid-morning, and then while I'm waking up, I'll try to go through the kind of the underbrush, as I call it, of email and business stuff, et cetera, and kind of get awake and engaged. Then I'll write pretty much the rest of the morning and the afternoon. Break for dinner. Spend like 3 hours ulcerating about the Mets being terrible.
Will they ever be good again?
Oh, someday. But yeah, I mean, hey, they were in the World Series.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
3 years ago, so it's not terrible.
Yeah.
And then I'll try to go back to my desk and do some more writing. I find the late night sessions are usually not productive, though. I wind up going down like internet rabbit holes and whatnot, and actually getting very little done. So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to make that part of my day more productive. But I don't know. One thing I have found is, and I'd be curious what you think of this, is, there really is, the writing vessel refills itself overnight, but there really is kind of only so much you have in a day.
Yeah.
And, you push it more than that, and you just kind of get sand coming out of the nozzle.
Yeah, there are times, when you really hit going for it, and then at the end your brain just feels like a wrung out sponge. You're just like, ugh.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, it's though actually that is a lesson I've learned, which once again, do as I say, not as I do, because I'm terrible about following through on it. But I would have never thought that you have to be in sort of decent physical shape to write, but I do find it really helps. I mean, it's tiring.
Yeah.
Your fingers are doing stuff and no other part of your body is, but it's still, it's still effort. So, but I need to get better at that. Fortunately, this is an audio interview.
All right. See, because I'm dressed. Well, I'm not really dressed up, but I don't do dressed up, but I am wearing my Chewbacca shirt. That's kind of fancy for me.
Yeah, well, all right. I'm pacing around and I keep walking by my treadmill, which is covered with dust. So, maybe there's a New Year's resolution for me to get back in better shape, because it'll also help the writing. Hey,
well, it says if you're walking back and forth next to your treadmill, it's kind of like you don't even need the treadmill.
It's true. I am getting in a lot of steps. There's something.
Do you do like any kind of like the little Fitbit thing, where you can count or measure your daily sort of output?
No, I get really annoyed by having something on my wrist, and I know you can like do it on your phone, et cetera, but I'm not very good at it. But my wife has been doing it, so I'm starting. I'll join her for walks and stuff, and then try to extrapolate how many steps I might have. So I think this is my way of saying that I'm going to do that soon, but haven't worked my way up to it.
Well, it's like you're saying, the writing career is always, maybe every creative career is a continual figuring out and solving of the puzzle process.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things I do, I have and this is maybe, I don't know if you have a pet or anything, but I have a dog that's mostly boxer, and he just essentially at different points in the day comes up and sits next to my desk with these just most precious, pleading, begging eyes, and it's just like, just one walk, just one, which usually gets me off my, and I get out, it's like 30 minutes, and it's nice to, get the blood flowing, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Mandated break, and it makes the dog happy. All good.
Totally. And it is like you're saying as well, the writing, although it's not like, swinging a pickaxe, in a coal mine or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. But humans weren't made to sit, 8 hours or 6 hours in a chair or whatever. Like it becomes debilitating over time.
Yeah. My big purchase a couple of years ago was a standing desk. And after I thought about it a little while, I went like all out and bought this, I kind of bought this ridiculously expensive standing desk. But the way I justified it, I was like, there's my bed and my desk. Like those are where I spend, probably 2/3 of my day. So, I was like, that's a good investment, actually.
Right. Does it raise and lower like the up and down?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then, the pad to stand on and all that. And I have found that does help. Change your eye line, make you keep your shoulders from rounding in, and it's all those perils of the desk bound. It is good to fight against.
Yeah, and I just did both of those recommendations, and it actually helped. I was just noticing, hey, my shoulders are kind of slunched over there.
Yeah. No, I don't think I can ever get one of those like chair things that you kind of balance on. I mean, I would just fall down all the time and injure myself. But I'm working on it.
Right on, right on. Yeah, and it's just and that's word to the wise out there, folks. If you're aspiring writers, this show is really kind of, we go towards fans, and there's quite a few writers that listen as well. But I guess maybe just that's the lesson in general. People need to stay active, and you can be more productive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I wanted to, you mentioned a couple of times, and I had read a number of interviews. You're talking about working with Rian Johnson. And one of the quotes I think that you had mentioned from him that I found to be pretty cool, and I wanted to get your perspective on, was that he kind of mentioned over and over the idea of lift, not drag, in your writing of the film. What was going on there?
Oh, yeah. No, that was something Rian said when we talked that became basically my commandment in writing the novel. He had talked about how even when the movie was approaching tragic events or dealing with really weighty matters, that he wanted it to have that sense of fun and adventure that's really, I mean, just, part and parcel of Star Wars. He didn't want to ever lose that. And I love the way he described it, lift, not drag. And so I was thinking about that while I was writing too, like how can I do that? Whether it was, sometimes you have like some good rat-a-tat dialogue between, say, Rose and Finn. Could I extend that some? Or, could I write a scene from a different character's point of view or perspective to, kind of break the narrative up in an interesting way? Was there like a fun bit of lore we could throw in? So, I found that really useful and really helpful as a guiding principle in the book.
And it's very cool. Do you know, because they're having a minor background in flying planes and such, those are both sort of aerodynamic terms. Is Rian a plane enthusiast, a flyer?
Ooh, I don't know that. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, he might be. Those are lift and drag are pretty much the two biggest principles. Or I guess thrust. You have lift, drag, and thrust. There we go. That covers it.
Yeah, if you're telling a story and you don't have the thrust, you've got a large problem. So,
that's right.
Maybe that is where he got it. But I loved it. It was really helpful. Very
cool. And in writing all of these different characters for The Last Jedi, did you find kind of at the end, looking back, were there any in particular that you enjoyed writing more than the others?
I really honestly loved all of them. That's not diplomacy. I genuinely did. One thing I loved is they were so different. Luke, Luke, Leia, I've known my whole life, and even though they're fictional characters, they almost feel like friends or family members at this point. So, that was both a huge honor and a big responsibility to write them. But the newer characters too, like I love the interplay between Finn and Rose. I think they're such a good pairing. And, Finn also Finn is such an interesting character. He, he's kind of, there's something kind of open and childlike about him, but he's also just incredibly brave and has this amazing story. He's basically this child soldier who, broke through his conditioning and broke away, and then is trying to figure out what he's going to fight for. What does he do next? Which I think is a great story, and one I tried to, balance the fun parts of his story with the parts that, remind the reader of just, what an amazing thing he does and accomplishes. For the writing, some of the interesting ones were Holdo was a very interesting character. One thing I did not want to do was write the novelization for people who knew the movie really well. That was too meta for me, even though I knew, honestly, that was a lot of the audience. Like, if something was a surprise in the movie, I wanted to make it feel like a surprise in the book. I thought that was a way of being loyal to the story and doing my job that I needed to pursue. But that made characters like Holdo interesting. Like, you had to kind of stay with Poe's point of view of Holdo. You couldn't really know what she was about or go into her head until after the turn in her relationship with Poe.
Okay.
So things like that were interesting to think through and figure out how to approach. But I really loved all of them. And, another fun thing was, as I alluded to before, was getting to present a scene or sequence from some other character's point of view. And that was something I got to do a lot, whether it was Tally, the resistance pilot Tally, or, some of the First Order officers like Kennedy and Peavy, or even some the droids were another big one. I go into like BB-8 and R2-D2 and C-3PO's heads, which was a lot of fun to do.
Oh, that's super cool. So there are chapters from their perspectives?
Yeah, scenes at least.
Very cool.
And then, even some characters who we don't really think of as characters, like, some of the ships and starfighters are actually kind of characters in their own right, which, you didn't want to do a lot, but here and there it was a fun perspective to play with.
Yeah, that sounds very cool. And like when you were writing Leia's scenes, did the, obviously probably everybody out there knows the real life passing of Carrie Fisher. Did that play at all into the writing of those scenes and how you approach them?
Yeah, that was really interesting. The number one commandment for any storyteller is to be loyal to the story. It's that above all else.
Right.
And, Rian Johnson and the folks at Lucasfilm, made the choice not to let The Last Jedi become kind of self-aware about Carrie Fisher's death. And, I honored that. I was very careful not to turn it into something meta, even as a tribute to Carrie Fisher.
Right.
And once again, just to be loyal to the story. This is a character and an actress who meant, the world to me. But I thought that was the way to go. The funny thing is, I suspect when you read the book, it feels like a tribute anyway. How could you possibly help it?
Maybe it's a tempered tribute. That's reasonable, right?
But I decided, that's okay. How could it not be? And so, getting into Leia's head, was just amazing thing to get to do. She's such an amazing character. She's caustic, but also warm. She has this just supernatural sense of duty, but there's also an emotional toll it takes on her.
Right.
And she's an amazing character, but, such a large part of her being such an amazing character is because Carrie Fisher was such an incredible actress and person. So I really hope this book honors the character and the actress.
Right. And it's, I wanted to ask about, you're talking about kind of staying loyal to the story and following the beats and things. The Last Jedi has, and I would say all, or at least most of the Star Wars episodes do have them, but I think in particular, The Last Jedi really nails it. There are some heavy, and not to go against the lift, not drag, but, maybe not heavy, but very emotional, big turning point beats in this story. How did you approach kind of that sort of emotionality?
You let it be what it is. That sounds, I don't know, that sounds a little fortune cookie, but I think it's the way to do it. It's just being loyal to the story. Again, there are these big emotional moments here, and you present them. And, then the decision, as a novelizer, you're really an interpreter, is, you certainly don't want to undercut them, but so you're thinking more about here's the beat in the story. Is there something I can underline, enrich, deepen, or, in some cases, is the moment powerful enough that the best thing you can do is present it and let it speak for itself and move on? Those are kind of the interesting questions to solve, as the Rubik's cubes to solve as you're moving along. And, as with everything else, in some cases I thought about them ahead of time, how to handle them. And in other cases, it was kind of seat of the pants.
Yeah, that sounds very cool. And of the, I had read in a couple of different places, we're talking about the expanded edition. So you got the opportunity to add some different aspects and scenes in from what we've seen in the movie. What were maybe your favorite or some of your favorite things that you got to create from whole cloth?
I wrote a really interesting prologue, which has been talked about a fair amount, which is gratifying. It opens with Luke Skywalker standing in the sands of Tatooine, his wife by his side, which people are like, what? As it turns out, it's a dream sequence, but it's a dream sequence that tells Luke that the Force is at work trying to get through his defenses and bring him a message. And, it's there because I felt like it was a very interesting echo of the story of him on Ahch-To and what he's doing. So it's there it gave me a great opening line and it was fun to play with, but it's really there because I think it echoes the story in an interesting way and gets at the themes. That was a lot of fun to do. My Del Rey editor, Elizabeth Schaefer, and I, when we sat down, we were like, what would we really want to see? What do we just have to see? And we came up with Han Solo's funeral. So after the dream sequence, we go to Dakar, and the evacuation is almost ready to go, and Leia leads kind of a brief memorial for Han. That was amazing to write, both as a tribute to Han, but really as a character moment for Leia. That was a terrific scene to dig into. From the very beginning, I knew I wanted a quiet scene with Rey after the throne room duel with Kylo, before she links up with Chewie and they go down to Crate for the final battle, where she would reflect on what had changed in her relationship with the Force and Kylo and all that. I wanted that to be a real quiet scene. That was a lot of fun to write. One final one came really late in the process. Mike Siglain and Jen Heddle of Lucasfilm, we really almost done, and they said, "Oh, we had an idea for another scene," and I was like, "Oh my God, what? Are you serious? I'm almost out of gas." And then they wanted a scene at the very end with Leia and Chewie alone in the cockpit of the Falcon. Just a kind of an emotional beat between the two of them after losing Luke and everything they'd been through. And I was like, wow.
Right. Like this, are these the survivors of the old guard kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, wow, that's an amazing scene. I was like, yeah, we absolutely have to have that. And then I was like really kind of scared because I was like, wow, that's a huge emotional scene. I got to make it work. But that turned out to be one of my favorite scenes in the book too.
All right. Just to let everybody know, I'm getting chill bumps right now. I can't wait to read this scene. It's I'm insanely looking forward to it. So cool.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. I hope you like it.
Well, you mentioned the first line, and I haven't, as I said, cracked the book open yet. Haven't had an opportunity to, but I did see the first scene. I think maybe you had quoted it in a couple different places. Totally love it. And if you're willing, I think it would be fantastic. Could you read that first line for listeners of the show right now?
Sure. I gotta get one of my reader copies, but that's easily done. You can't read your own first line wrong from memory. That's right. not a good look.
That would be that would be the kind of fell I would cut out of the show and we'd redo it again.
Yeah. We'll spare you the editing work. Luke Skywalker stood in the cooling sands of Tatooine, his wife by his side. And off we go.
I know, right? That's like everybody, because that's like a giant tornado, basically. In any Star Wars fan's mind, you're like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Very cool. And I already knew the line because I'd read it other places, but it's wonderful to hear it from the brain from which it sprung.
Thanks.
Right on. And one of the things that I thought was fun about the movie, and I can't wait to get your interpretations of it in the book, are the scenes in I think it's, tell me if I'm mispronouncing this, but Canto Bight, the casino place.
Yeah.
One thing I just loved about it, and obviously it's kind of an echo of the Mos Eisley Cantina and the sort of varied characters that you get. one of the things I loved way back in the day was the Tales of the Mos Eisley Cantina, where you get these little short stories about each of the or at least many of the characters in the Mos Eisley Cantina. Are you aware of it? Is there anything going to be coming like that for Canto Bight Casino?
Yeah, it's already out actually.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know.
Yeah. There's a wonderful book called from Del Rey called just Canto Bight, I think it is. Which is 4 novellas about kind of background characters from the Canto Bight sequences. But yeah, it's John Jackson Miller, Ray Carson, Saladin Ahmed, whose name I hope I didn't pronounce wrong, and Mira Grant. And they're all 4 of them are really, really fun stories. And it was great I tried to make sure that we had a nod in the direction of those characters. In the Canto Bight sequence of the novelization. But yeah, Canto Bight, check it out. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks for the update there. And one other aspect I wanted to ask about that kind of sequence on that world was, at the end, you kind of get the sense that there's this force broom sweeping kid, and you don't get too much more about it than that. Were you able to kind of give some more background into what's going on there in that character?
We get a little bit of that character's thoughts, a little bit about his relationships with some of the other kind of urchins in the stable. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to do more than that. I mean, that's such a powerful visual and symbolic scene that I didn't want to weigh it down too much with names and descriptions, and I think too much of that would have undercut why it's there in the movie as this kind of really nice coda. But yeah, that was fun to write. Though one of the hard things was when I saw the movie for the first time, I totally missed that he uses the force to pull the broom into his hand. I didn't see it.
It was pretty subtle. It's kind of off to the side there.
Yeah, I love that it was subtle, but I was like, oh, wow, I missed that. And then I saw it the second time. I was like, oh, that's really cool. But that was an interesting writing challenge. I was like, how do I convey the broom doing that? And I think ultimately I didn't. And, the reason was it was, it's no big thing to the kid. That's the whole point.
Right.
He's just like, broom. And, it doesn't really matter that he's not going 3 feet. That he just stretches out his hand. So, but yeah, I kind of agonized over that one. Like, how do we show that without bringing everything to a stop? But,
right.
Those are the fun little challenges in translating visual storytelling into the page.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So we're going to leave, not leave behind, but transition into a few kind of more personal questions about your feelings and et cetera about the Star Wars universe. You ready?
Sure.
Very cool. So one would be if you could choose one obscure, relatively obscure character in the Star Wars universe that would get its own movie, who would it be?
Oh, their own movie. Oh, goodness me. Honestly, what I think is, and forgive me, this answer sounds like a cop-out because I at least don't think it is. But one of the things that is so much fun about Star Wars right now, frankly, is new characters.
Yeah, that's true.
People are so invested in Rey, Finn, Kylo, Rose, who, we'd never heard of a couple of years ago. Same thing with Rogue One. I mean, I love Baze and Chirrut are such phenomenal characters in K2. And, again, they come from, you don't know them at all to who the actors are in publicity stuff, and then their stories, and then you're like, oh my God, I love Baze and Chirrut. I need more Baze and Chirrut stories. So honestly, I mean, that's what I think is so amazing now. I mean, whether it's that or the cast of the cast of Rebels or something else is just constantly finding new characters and new stories. So. Yeah, I mean, that would be fun, but honestly, I'm loving the new stuff. So I just hope they keep doing that. And, I'm much more excited about the, 8, 10, 12, 20, however many it is characters that we're going to meet in the next 5, 6, 7 years who are going to be, as dear to us as some of the old standbys before we know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more about this kind of new generation of amazing characters. And obviously with the big star amongst them being Rey, and in the first movie, The Force Awakens, I couldn't have been more invested in her journey by the end of that movie, partly because it's just, it's a great story and very cool. She's a good character, but also, I have two daughters, and 8 and 10 years old, and to see this very, very strong, independent survivor in the Star Wars universe, I was just like, I have to take my girls to see this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's wonderful. And I'm also just as happy about, I'm also really happy about little boys who will grow up with Rey as a hero. And, hopefully that will shape them too, and say like, oh, I can be invested in that character. There's nothing wrong with that at all. She's an awesome character no matter who she is. But yeah, no, I love all these characters. I got to write a book, Bomber Command, about Paige Tico, which was so much fun, exploring her relationship with Rose. And I have a book, Rose Resistance Fighter, coming out in May. A character I would love to tell a story about is Tali Lintra, the Resistance pilot, who was only on the screen for like a minute and a half, but I just loved all those scenes. So,
right.
All these characters are so much fun that, if I would love to write about any or all of them. And, since that's not possible, I'll avidly read everything I don't get to write.
Well, we're getting near the end of the show, and that can mean only one thing, which means it's time to clean the sticky goo residue from popcorn and Coke off the bottom of the soles of your shoes, right? Wrong. It means this. Welcome to the Rorschach round, where we use ambiguously odd questions to delve deeper into the minds of these amazing authors. Let's get started. But before we go, we have something we call the Rorschach round. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I'm ready though.
Yeah, right.
I'm ready.
Yeah, so Rorschach round. It's about asking ambiguously odd questions, so that just like the Rorschach test, listeners, fans out there get a deeper sense of your mind and how you think.
Okay.
Here we go. So let's see. Question 1 of the Rorschach round: who gets more space babes? Han Solo before getting married, or Captain Kirk before getting old?
Oh, I'm going to go with Han Solo. It's hilarious. I don't have the Star Trek gene. It's nothing against Star Trek. I was born without it. I like every 3 or 4 years, I'll like try a Star Trek movie and think like, maybe this time it'll happen. And then I'm like, okay. So I've just reluctantly accepted that I'm a Star Wars guy and not a Star Trek guy.
Hey, I think it's some philosopher at some point was know thyself. I think you're nailing it.
Yeah. I keep trying, and I'm happy for everyone who loves Star Trek, but it doesn't work for me, and that's about me, not it.
Right on. All right, next question. In the scene where Han is facing Greedo in Mos Eisley Cantina, are you a Han shoots first kind of guy, or are you a Greedo shoots first and Han only then responds kind of guy?
I'm absolutely a Han shoots first guy. I just, I can't even go there. I just can't.
Okay. All right. Moving on. But you heard it. We know everyone now. And actually, and in full admission of clarity, I also am a 100% Han shoots first kind of guy.
Yeah, I got to ask, have you ever gotten a Greedo shoots first response?
Well, that's the first time I've ever asked it. So
okay.
I'm going to, like your little notebooks where you keep such detailed notes, now there's 2 checks in the Han first column. And as I go forward, then we'll see how the tally comes out.
Yeah, I'm curious how that one's going to come out, though I think I can guess.
Right. Okay. And next question. These are just quick, sort of off the top of the head. R2-D2 or BB-8?
R2.
And C-3PO or K-2SO?
K-2.
And Wookiees or Ewoks?
Wookiees.
All right, just a few more here. And the Empire or the First Order?
Empire.
All right, and Palpatine or Palpitate?
Palpatine.
And then
That's an interesting one. Yeah.
And finally, the most oddly ambiguous of all, Star Wars or Straw Oars?
I'm going to go with Star Wars, but if Straw Oars needs a writer, they should email me.
They should totally email you. And it's Straw Oars. I think that technology, like once people left Egypt and started using wood for oars, I'm assuming that technology fell away, but I don't know. Right on. Well, Jason, it has been a super pleasure and a great time getting to chat with you. Before we go, I wanted to ask, and I think you'd kind of mentioned it there a few minutes ago, but what upcoming projects do you have that readers and fans can look forward to?
I have a book, Rose Tico Resistance Fighter, coming from Studio Fun in May, which I'm very excited about. This is kind of a replica journal in the style of Bomber Command and Ray's Survival Guide. Something for Solo that I cannot talk about yet, unfortunately.
Ooh.
But watch your Twitter feeds. And actually, I'm about to plunge back into my own series, The Jupiter Pirates, which is it's set in a galaxy not so far, far away, I say. It's set in the 29th century, and it follows a family of space pirates turned privateers who are loyal to the colony moons around Jupiter and engaged in a struggle with Earth. And it's a family saga where the family are all space pirates. The mother is the captain, the father is the first mate, and the children are midshipmen. But the catch is that all the children, while they have to work together as part of the crew, are also competing to be the next captain of the ship. So it's got space battles, it's got hidden treasures, it's got family rivalries and secrets. If you like Star Wars, I think you would like it too. But yeah, those 3 books from HarperCollins are out already, and I'm really excited to plunge into the writing of the 4th. So yeah, plenty to keep me busy.
Man, yeah, sounds like it. All sounds very cool. And if folks want to find out more about you and what you do, where are some good places to look?
On Twitter, I'm Jason C. Fry. The C is important. And you can also find my Tumblr. It's Jason Fry's Dorkery.
Right on. And, we'll make sure and get the links to where possible, all of those in the show notes so folks can easily check them out. And Jason, once again, I just wanted to say, seriously, thank you so much for coming on the show. It has been an absolute honor. I can't wait to read this book. I'm going to be your biggest fan, but not in a creepy way like whatever her name was, Bates back in Misery.
Yeah, please don't do that. But no, I really hope you like the book, and thanks so much. This was a blast.
So I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I did, and I did very much. Thank you so much to Jason for joining us today and talking about all things Star Wars, and in particular, The Last Jedi. I cannot wait to jump into that book and lose, hopefully, a day or two of my life with characters and scenarios and situations that I just absolutely love. So thank you so much for that. To check out any of the links mentioned in the show, there at the end, just go to the usual place on my website, which in this case is www.williamoday.com/the number of the episode, which in this case is 21. That's it for today. If you would like to be sure to never miss a show and always have them immediately available on your device of choice, you can subscribe by going to www.williamoday.com/iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, I would so appreciate a rating and review on iTunes. They both help with store visibility, and they also let other listeners know if this show is something that they might be interested in checking out. And I've made it easy to access both of those by going to the same link on my website, www.williamoday.com/iTunes. That will have a link there that you can jump over to either subscribe and or maybe all 3, rate and review the show. So I would so appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's it for now. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the OMG Book Show. You can find out more at www.williamoday.com.